You're listening to Francis Oblivion and the Mad Undead by J. Johnson Higgins. This audiobook edition is a Kiss the Widow production.
Chapter 18. And the demons raised their heads.
Journal of Dr. Rebecca T.D. Stars Aza, October 18th. I broke down in front of Adrian. I tried so hard not to, and despite the situation mounting before us, I just couldn't help it. I felt so sad when I saw Icky again. I knew it wasn't really him, but some parts of my mind didn't know the difference. Leaving Icky was one of those things I needed to do, and my therapist helped me reach the conclusion that it had to be done if I ever wanted to be happy again. There came a point when nearly every issue or defeat in my life could be traced to him. At first, I didn't want to believe it, but it was true. Later, I realized that it was obvious, just not to me. About a year ago, before casting my spell and taking everyone to the sanctuary, I'd broken up with Icky. I did not contact him, stay with him, or even interact with his immediate circle, which was tougher than it sounds given our common pastimes. It was so tough because I really thought I loved him and that I'd never find someone again. I suppose I do love him still, if I'm honest, just not in the same way. I'd realized later that it wasn't the end of the world to put that space between us, but it would have been tough to convince me otherwise back then. There's always the other part to all this that no one ever talks about. There's the human part that makes people stick to us for the rest of our lives. It's amorphous and illogical. Even today, I can't deny that I feel a sting in knowing that this person wanted me, but I've resisted his attempts to reestablish communication. I walked away. Now he was dead and Francis killed him because I knew him. It was that illogical nerve that was struck this morning. After not seeing or talking to Icarus for over a year, I'd thought I'd moved on. But there he was, before me again, and I wanted to cry. The feeling came from nowhere. I was so sure that I was only making a fool of myself in front of Adrian, showing how much I'd grown in a year, which was not in the slightest, but I was wrong. Instead, he cut through it all and helped me realize the spell that I was under. He reminded me that this was a parlor trick orchestrated by a spirit that was attempting to get inside of me, and in some ways already had gotten inside of me. He helped me to remember the truth. Icky was not here. Icky was dead. I still had not actually seen him for over a year. Adrian was right. We'd simply found ourselves in that frightening place where the sun hides at the edge of the world, and the demons raise their heads at the chance to exploit us for all that we are or have failed to become. I had to resist. With a closer examination, I could see that Francis's mannerisms were off, and could not be Icky's. This helped mentally. His face just wasn't completely right, and his eyes did not belong to a man, known or unknown to me. This was an incubus in the skin of a man, weaving magic so black that all I could do was feel bad in its presence. Another clue, I saw that the figure had that saber at his hip that my great-grandfather described. I was sure this was the same ornate cutlass dangling at his side. I was almost mad at my great-grandfather for not giving the impact of seeing his friend much justice in his description. He went right over it, but it must have felt awful to be in such a terrible situation and presented with such strange, sudden, and illusionary guilt. I was not at all prepared to feel so bad today. What a horrible spell. It pains me to even recall how little hope I thought we had at that moment, and write it here. The world was upside down to me, and anything was possible. When I was ready to retreat from the world, lose sight of our objectives and give up, Adrian reminded me of this convincing spell and pulled me out of it. Adrian made me look into his eyes.
It's a trick. It's not him,
He said to me, staring at me with an intensity that was just so genuine, yet his eyes were so gentle and concerned, big eyes.
I won't let him do this to you.
I'd been lost in the past, but Adrian was there to tell me that the story was not over, and that in the next chapter, I'd overcome this. He would help me defeat this monster and, dare I say, succeed where my great-grandfather had not. Adrian didn't care about possibly being lost in the process. He'd die for me. But that was where I drew the line. I wouldn't let him do that. He's my problem. I said to him, "You shouldn't even be here, Adrian. You don't deserve this. I pulled you into this."
No, enough of that. He's a problem for both of us. That thing wants to kill us, me first. You said it yourself. Those are tricks he's using on us. He's confusing us, and the longer we let it work, the easier it will be for him to win.
My Adrian shook his head.
But he's not going to win because you're smarter than he is and you understand him too. He doesn't fully understand what you're capable of, so he spies to find out and he keeps failing. The proof is that you're still here. I am still here too. I've seen what you can do. As ridiculous and impossible as everything appears to be right now, I would not be alive, and I certainly would not be standing here if you weren't amazing at what you do.
But I don't know what I'm doing. I motioned to try and deny his claims, but he wouldn't accept it and pushed on.
You do know what you're doing. You've gotten us this far. You have a plan for him, remember? You expected this eventually. Maybe a little later, but you did. What happens next? I'll help you get it done. You've already started. Here.
He pointed to the map. This is again why I love Adrian so much. It was like he understood me better than I understood myself. He knew that busy tasks activated the better me and often broke these kinds of spells. I don't know what he kept seeing in me, but whatever it was, it made me feel very good just then, and he threaded the needle of this situation just right. He reminded me to think back on everything I'd learned about the monsters despite their propensity to adapt, and he took my mind off Icky. He brought me back to the present, to where Icky was an old stress. The real stress was across the water waiting to feast on me and my reflective companion. I no longer wanted to cry, and the spell was breaking. He got me to refocus on the important question that existed before Francis had stolen a face. What happens next? I had an answer in the works too, but sure enough, Francis had clouded my mind with his sorcery. But just as I was ready to speak, something else developed across the water. Francis emerged from the shed, but with my motorcycle. He turned on the engine, and it started up. My jaw nearly dropped to the ground when I saw this. I reached into my pockets and removed the key to the machine just to be sure I was not seeing things. I had the keys. I looked at the keychain. All the keys were accounted for. He must have hotwired it or found some other way because there was no spare out here on the shore. We watched Francis pull the bike out into the lot just in front of the lighthouse and slam on the accelerator. Before his followers, he began to perform a series of motorcycle stunts, familiar motorcycle stunts. He stole my bike and my moves. What the fuck? I blurted out involuntarily. But then, were they really my moves? I guess the moves were not originally mine, though I'd used them. I'd learned them from Icky, once upon a time, but that wasn't the only reason why it bothered me. What really bothered me was that I'd circled Adrian with my bike exactly like the specter was twisting and turning now about his bonfire. Right there in front of the lighthouse, I'd drawn heart-shaped tire marks around Adrian, but my investigative companion didn't even look down to see them. I was hoping he'd simply look down at them, even from the top of the lighthouse, but it just didn't happen. I'd never mentioned it. I thought that would have ruined it somehow if I had to tell him to look, and the shy part of me thought that maybe I was being too forward with him too soon. I mean, let's be honest, I didn't really know him yet. I was just freaking excited. Hearts? Why am I such a loser? I said nothing. It pissed me off that even Francis picked that up, Adrian. I could see the hearts at that distance with the binoculars. Francis, across the way, gave me a chill by performing these moves. Either he knew that Icarus had originally taught me the sequence of tricks years ago, or he was present at the lighthouse when I just performed them for Adrian myself. How could he have known them or the significance of them unless he'd watched me? I did not write them down. Either way, it was frightening how much this thing seemed to know about me, and it said a lot about what kind of game it intended to play.
Journal of Adrian Eckenrode, October 19th. We saw Francis complete several stunts on the motorcycle just as Becca had performed for me the other day. Perhaps he intended to mock her or bother me. It was working because it made me angry and hot. I could feel myself becoming less rational by the second and needed to look away. That was one of our moments. I know it wouldn't have meant much for others, but for me, there was no replacement for seeing Becca doing the things that she did on that motorcycle that day. Those moments just showing off because she could. Showing off to me because she thought it would be fun to, because she actually liked me. This interesting girl liked me. Francis was making fun of it, and that was making me sick. Let's focus on what happens next, I'd said, but must admit, my attention was again diverted, as was Becca's. Once we'd thought Francis was finished with the stunts, he'd surprised us again. He had a major stunt in store that we simply couldn't ignore. He drifted on the bike until he faced the water, then accelerated as hard as he could. To anyone this would look like a suicide move because there would be no time to stop at that speed before splashing into the ocean. Francis was not slowing down. What is he doing? I asked myself, but very soon I had my answer. As if there was no change in the terrain, we saw Francis ride the motorcycle right onto the ocean. Seeing the specter glide across the water, Becca and I were petrified. To what could we attribute this wild slipping and sliding to, but something supernatural and otherworldly at its core? Becca turned to me and began giving me her eagerly awaited instructions.
Here's what I need you to do.
Becca started.
Take this bag and the map.
She handed me her backpack and the map.
This too.
She handed me one of her many keys. I did not at the time know what it opened.
I want you to run as fast as you can to the top of that hill over there. Do you see it?
She pointed. I did see it. It was likely the highest vantage point in the area.
Go there and try not to be seen. Once you're there, I want you to watch the mad undead for me. Be sure that they stay where they are on the coastline. If they leave the coast or end up out of your sight for any reason, I need you to signal me. That's important.
What will be the signal?
This.
Becca reached into one of the side pockets of the backpack I was holding and removed a piece of purple cloth. She unfolded it and revealed to me a crystal so bright that I needed to squint to observe it. She quickly covered it again.
Just hold it up high. I'll see it. That will be the signal.
She put the crystal back into the bag. What happens then?
Follow the path I marked for you on the map and meet me at the location I circled. There's a storage unit there.
There was what looked like a series of sheds around the mark.
That direction is north, but you're going this way.
She pointed to a specific serpentine path that eventually turned north.
If there are any signs of danger, I want you leaving immediately.
And what about you? What are you doing?
First, I'm going to take that sword from Francis and jab it into his heart. Then I'm going to get my motorcycle back. You're going to help me do that.
That's dangerous, Becca. How are you going to do that? How can you get that close?
That's why it's so important that you watch my back on this. Here.
Becca grabbed the map back from me but folded it up into a 4 by 6 inch page, the back facing out.
When the time is right, and you'll know when.
She began to scrawl something onto the back of the map.
I'll need you to read this series of words aloud while holding that crystal I gave you. I didn't intend to use the crystal this way yet, but the plan has changed.
She handed me back the map, now with words on it. I started whispering them to myself, but she stopped me before finishing by pushing down the page.
Don't read it now. Only when the time is right. I'll be near Francis for a moment. Very near. You will see me. That crystal I gave you is a piece of the sun. Francis hates the sun, and it should throw him off. Do you understand?
Yes, I understood what to do, but it was all strange. A piece of the sun? Figuratively? Literally? How? Where did she get it from? I did not know. But there was indeed something bright in this bag, and it was warming me on this particularly cool day. As warm as the crystal was, it could not compare to the warmth in Becca's words to follow.
Good. Be quick, but be careful. We won't have a lot of time for this, but you mean more to me, and I'll protect you first if it comes down to it. I'll be watching your back, too. Stay safe. I love you, babe.
Becca said. It was such a profound and direct statement, yet it was something only she could get away with so casually before she turned to leave. I stopped her by the hand, though, and she looked back. I wanted to kiss her just then, and though I could tell she knew that, she did not give in to it so easily. She linked her fingers tight into mine. The task at hand was clearly foremost in her mind.
We need to take care of this,
Becca said. Then, she temporarily revised her disposition. She stepped forward, placing her free hand on my cheek and planting a small kiss on my lips. Despite its brevity, I could see that she meant every second of it.
Get to the hill. Once you're finished there, get to that storage shed, okay, babe?
Then she released my hand.
We'll pick this up there.
She added, seconds before she turned and sprinted across the hill, weaving between trees. She stopped.
Don't forget to write in your journal.
She shouted back like an assignment. She moved on. By then, she faced the demon down below. Then she ran forth out of my field of vision. Becca may downplay her role sometimes, but I believe Francis picked a fight with the wrong woman and has met his match in her. He never could have suspected that he would be facing someone who fought back and with the same mystical forces again and again. He must be confused by her. Becca's decision to fight Francis then was a little bolder than I felt comfortable with, but I should have expected it, and it was too late to change anything by then. Her decision to act was, in a way, softened by those 3 words she said before she turned. I love you. But I could not think about it for too long. I had to move. It was my turn to act. I ran in the opposite direction and up the tallest hill. I stayed low as I moved and looked to my left periodically. Once on the top of that hill, I brought the binoculars to my eyes. My first instinct was to find Becca, but I did not see her down below at the beach yet. The only thing I saw was Francis, who was now on the island. I could see him moving slowly about the sandy shore. But it was not my objective to watch him. I was to watch the mad undead, and that I did. At first, they stayed right where I'd seen them last. On the western shore, as close to the water as possible without the ebb and flow touching them. Then, I saw the next unbelievable events unfolding. I looked back and forth between Francis and the mad undead. Francis got off the motorcycle and pulled his saber from its sheath. He held it high into the air, and it began to glow. Across the water, the mad undead responded. The shadows began to float over the water and moved toward the island. This was a sign of danger if I'd ever seen one, and the last thing I'd expected. I needed to warn Becca already. I scrambled to retrieve the crystal she'd given me, the piece of the sun, but the most unlikely of things happened. I dropped the crystal and saw it tumble down into the woods below, its brightness hidden by the foliage. I swore and dived after it. Now I was tumbling down the hill too. Whatever Becca was doing, I really hoped that this plan was going to work. Especially now that I'd hit a delay and the mad undead were moving faster than ever. At the bottom of the hill, I realized I still had hope. The bright piece of the sun was so luminous that I could not miss it except by being blinded by it. I grabbed it. I looked to the top of the hill and sprinted all the way back to the top beyond the foliage, holding the prism high over my head and waving it back and forth. I could only hope that my message was delivered. I grabbed the binoculars again to confirm my message's receipt and to check on the mad undead. They were gone. I looked back to Francis and found that his followers were all now on the island at his side. Most of them seemed to be. But where was Becca? A good minute must have passed in anticipation before I saw her come into view. She was facing my direction and must have seen my signal. But the meaning of the message was now untimely, and the threat was obvious as she was so close to the monsters that I couldn't believe it. Before I knew it, I was surprised too. I heard shuffling in the woods below and stopped. I dropped the binoculars and scanned the area. I started to back away. 4 of the mad undead emerged from the woods and stopped. Now what? I thought. I wasn't prepared for this. The creatures screamed in unison and started to run at me. I was completely terrified, but the strangest thing happened in that instant. I saw Becca materialize right in front of me. She shoved me back and I fell to the ground. Then, she pulled her morning and day daggers and held them defensively. With the movement of her hands, the daggers began to glow, and she caused the earth to shake and the ground to bend. She caused a landslide to result that smashed right into all 4 of the mad undead before they could get too close. They plummeted down the hill with increasing violence the entire way. Becca dropped her arms with a sigh and turned to me.
You just keep that crystal ready and wait for the right moment. You're doing great.
Becca drew a line on the ground in front of me with her foot, perhaps another form of protection.
I'm sure they won't try that again, but either way, don't cross this line, no matter what.
Becca said, with a little grin before she vanished again. I got back up and looked at the rearranged land before me. now too steep for the creatures to climb easily, and felt repelled by an invisible force as I approached the line. Then, I looked down at the beach again. Becca, through some special force, returned there suddenly. It was amazing to me how close she was to them again, and they began to try and close in on her. I saw Becca spin in place while pointing to the ground with her daggers, and white fire started around her. It was like she created some special circle of protection about herself that could be seen. Francis and the mad undead could not cross it. I saw Francis and the others stop in their sandy tracks. She moved steadily, stepping back, and whatever she'd done to ward them off was working. They were stepping out of her way as she moved. I could see then that Becca had taken on a calmer demeanor, yet her general caution remained. She was starting to talk to Francis, but I could not hear her. As the mad undead attempted to close in, I saw her gesture and point at them with the blades, forcing them to back away again. She pivoted and they responded. She laughed as if taunting them. Then, she put the blades away and crossed her arms. Then she raised one arm in question while speaking and dropped it to her thigh. I imagine she said something like, "What are you going to do now?" The words were followed by a shrug. I personally did not want to find out what other tricks this demon had in store. She seemed trapped as far as I was concerned. When I saw Francis reach down for his sword, I saw Becca briefly look in my direction. I knew it was my moment. I had to help her. I pulled the map and flipped it over while holding the crystal high above. The words read, "On this day I call forth the sun. Rise, 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 despite the dark skies." Repeat all 3 times. I began to read the incantation scrawled on the page and felt the stone get hotter and hotter until I could no longer hold it. I released it, but it did not fall. I saw it float into the sky. It pulsed brightly, and as I finished the words on the page for the 3rd time, it was as if I'd created a new sun. The lighthouse and the shy glimmer of the actual sun on the horizon were of no comparison. I had to look away. Before it got too bright, I saw the mad undead scatter. Becca reached for the sword at Francis's side, but just missed it when Francis shot backward and shielded his face. Francis made a counter using the sword, and I flinched. In reaction, Becca transformed into a flock of birds, temporarily causing the swing to miss her. She reformed to her original self, further away from him and crouching low. Now very much bothered by the light, I saw Francis retreat and dive into the ocean. The crystal became brighter and brighter until I could not see. With the crystal now irretrievable, I followed Becca's last instruction. I sprinted in the opposite direction on the path to the storage unit. I prayed that this all went as planned, as I could not confirm anything more from my position and from the lack of a visual. I didn't know if Becca had gotten out safely.
This story is 100% original and written by a human, yours truly, the author. AI was not used to write, prompt, organize, or otherwise generate this story. This audiobook edition was, however, created using licensed text-to-voice software with a lifelike casting and intonation manually adjusted and refined line by line by me, and art in and of itself. The theme music was written and produced by Kiss the Widow. If you like what you found so far, please like and follow, subscribe, and share. Also, please be sure to check out my socials.